Hey ho, guys. So let me get my pointer pen out here. Me pointer, that's a pen. Where's my pointer? There's the mouse. Oh, I hate it when my pointer isn't available. There's like a laser pointer thing, and it's just not here. Okay, I just gotta click on that, I guess. Okay, save mouse. I don't know what's wrong with the mouse. Is it not saving? I don't know. Okay, that was really weird. All right, so welcome to Lessoncast number one. And what I'm going to do in this very brief lesson is we're going to talk about what I refer to in class as the meta themes. It's just a fancy way of saying that there's an overarching sort of like idea or story that goes along with the material that we're covering. And we're going to be looking at three documents. We're actually, while the history course that we're going to be starting is going to be taking place after the Civil War, we're going to go back way before the Civil War and look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and George Washington's farewell address to America. Because what my hope is that as we go through these things this year and the events and material that we're talking about, you will begin to recognize that where we maybe got away from the original intention of the founders of this country is where a lot of our problems kind of started with. So, in any case, we'll start with this, and this should hopefully be fairly short. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, we're going to be looking at two excerpts or selections from them. But to begin with, as a little bit of a background, in order to understand what it is we're looking at, you have to realize that the Declaration and the Constitution are inseparable. That means that they really have to be looked at together. So the analogy that I'm going to use for this is um, the Lord of the Rings films. If you watch the Lord of the Rings, you can watch any one of the three films by itself, but they're not going to make a whole heck of a lot of sense unless you watch them all together. The Constitution and the Declaration can be read independently, but to fully understand what they are, especially the Constitution, you need to examine both documents. The documents complete and complement each other. Abraham Lincoln referred to the Declaration of Independence as a golden apple outlined by a beautiful silver frame. And what he meant by this was is that the two documents individually are beautiful, exquisite pieces of art, but together they form something magnificent that really is just complete. And in order to really understand this completeness, we really have to look at, and there's a reason why we're going back all the way to this, by the way, because it really, as I hope that we get through by the time that we're through this little introductory lesson, it'll really kind of highlight a lot of what the Civil War was about and a lot of the sort of like conditions in America that brought about the war and how they kind of are the result of not really following the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and Washington's farewell address, quite frankly. So there are three basic assumptions that we need to operate on. Assumption number one, and these assumptions were what the founding fathers, the people who created and started our country, all believed. Assumption number one, there is a creator force, a higher power. For just simplicity's sake, the term for this is God. God exists. Now, the real kind of important takeaway for this is that this is one of those arguments that keeps coming up in modern society. For extreme progressive liberal ideal people, that's the extreme political left, as they are called, there is no God. God is not really a factor for the extreme left. For the extreme right, they take it to the point where, yes, of course, God exists, but it has to be the God that I believe in. Thomas Jefferson, the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence, and Benjamin Franklin, one of his chief advisors in the creation of the document, were both agnostic deists. Now, that's a big term, but what it basically means is, as an agnostic, they believed that there was a higher power, but they didn't know what it was. But they were sure that there was something higher than them. They just didn't have a personal relationship with it. As a deist, they believed that that higher power was really found in nature. That's why Jefferson actually uses the term nature and nature's God in the Declaration, in the introduction, the portion we're going to read. So everybody understood and accepted that there was a creator, a God, and that God was at the top of the heap. Next, they all accepted the existence of truth. And we're not talking about honesty here. This goes back to what I talked about in the 5 stars. Truth is the existence of good and evil and right and wrong as real things that can be known through logic and reason. If you ever hear anybody use the expression my truth, that really is a falsehood. It's completely illogical. What happens when your truth is the exact opposite of somebody else's? Your truths can't be both true. Well, they can be if it's my truth and his truth. Well, the problem is that your two truths contradict each other. So either they're just opinions, which by their nature aren't truths, or one or both of you is wrong. Truth exists and can be known through logic and reason. Logic and reason can determine things like we don't want to kill people unnecessarily. We don't want to steal other people's property. We don't want other people taking advantage of our things or saying bad things about us. And on the flip side, we shouldn't be doing it about them. Truth can be known and understood. So, assumption number 1 for the founders is that there is a God. Number 2, that truth is real. Number 3, they all believed in a principle called subsidiarity. Now, that's a big fancy term, but it just basically means that there's sort of a structured flow of things. At the top of the heap is God. God has all the power. God has all the authority. God created everything. God created people. God gives people the ability to run themselves. And to run themselves, people create governments. So if you follow the flow chart, God has the ultimate power, then people with the power that they got from God, and people give government its power. This is a radical concept in the 17th century and 18th centuries. The idea that people are the source of power, not governments. The old way of looking at it was God gave government power and governments give people things. That's not how it works. God gives people power, rights, freedoms, liberties, and people create governments to protect the rights, freedoms, and liberties that they were given by God. So it goes God, people, government. They subsidiarity, they're sub under God, under him is people, under people is the government. So if you really follow this, government is the least powerful, least important factor on this list. These are 3 assumptions or beliefs that all the founders had. Now, this next part here is a little confusing, maybe, but I need to sort of talk it out quickly. The 2 documents don't contradict each other at all. And some people will argue that they do contradict each other. And specifically, the contradiction comes in Jefferson's introduction to the Declaration of Independence. What the Declaration sets out to do, it's sometimes referred to as a creed, a statement of beliefs. He says that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, where the contradiction comes in is people will go, but these people didn't believe everybody were created equal. They owned slaves. Well, yeah, and slavery is a sticky wicket, but in reality, the Declaration of Independence is pretty clear about the fact that we're all equal. Now, that's not equality of state. That does not mean that we're all equal, like we're all the same in terms of like our talents, abilities, money, etc. We're all individuals. We all have differences and we are all at different points in our lives, but we all have the equality of opportunity and we're all made equal in the eyes of our creator because we are made in the image and likeness of that creator. Well, people bring up, well, what about slavery? The Constitution was actually designed to let slavery die out. And it was designed to specifically fulfill Jefferson's intent to kill slavery off. The original draft of the Declaration included slavery as being an evil. He was forced to take it out to make some of the southern colonies happy. But the Constitution was originally designed so that slavery would eventually die off. And we're going to talk about that because that's an important thing to understand. The guy who is primarily responsible for a lot of what the Constitution is, at least in terms of his input, the actual guy who wrote it was a dude named, I think, Governor Morris. But the input for how the Constitution would be set up was James Madison, who was Thomas Jefferson's BFF. And in fact, close enough where he was like literally Jefferson's adopted son almost. They wouldn't do anything to contradict each other. In many ways, Madison was like Jefferson's toady. The Constitution was set up to realize Jefferson's vision of what America would be. I have a poster up in my room, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but it says something to the extent of there are two enemies of the people, criminals and the government. The Constitution needs to be made so that the second group, the government, does not end up becoming the first. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Now, the last thing, both the Declaration and the Constitution are meant to last. They were designed to simply be adaptable. Now, this is an important point to understand. What adaptable is the founders of our country were maybe the most brilliant group of European men ever assembled. And they realized that things in the future were going to be different than they could predict. Nobody could have predicted that airplanes would have been a big thing, 150 years after they wrote the Declaration of the Constitution. When the president was given the power as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, all that existed was the Army and the Navy, if you want to count the Marines, which is a branch of the Navy, and the Coast Guard. But that's it. But when the Air Force was created, it was assumed that that was part of the commander-in-chief role, even though it was never specifically stated. That's adaptability. Paved roads using asphalt and concrete, railroads, telephones, the internet, all of those things the Constitution is adaptable to. That's what's meant by adaptability. The Constitution can adjust itself as technology and circumstances change. What it does not change is it is not transient. It does not change what truth is. It does not change the principle of subsidiarity. It does not change the fact that there is an ultimate authority higher than government and higher even than the people. Both documents, these three assumptions have to be consistent at all times. It's always going to be adaptable, but it's not flighty or fickle. It's not like 50 years after they're going to decide, well, we all decided now that we'll be part of the cult of the flying spaghetti monster, so that we just don't have to pay attention to the creator because we don't think that's real anymore. That's not the way that either document was set up. Either document was not set up on the principle that your truth is okay. No, the truth is okay. And neither document is meant to at any point in time say that the government is the source of the power, authority, and rights of the people. It's meant to be set up that people give government its power, and government's purpose is to protect people, their rights, their liberties, their possessions, and property. Okay, that's it for today, kiddos. We'll pick this up later. Peace and love.